whose idea was this? That's a good idea. Hi. Yeah.
So a few months ago, a really good friend of mine in Louisiana was driving around and he found a 34 Ford Roadster that was sitting next to a garage. And it belonged to an 82-year-old guy who bought it in 1969 from California. And he drove it a few years, enjoyed it with his family, and took it apart sometime in the mid-70s, early 80s to restore, and it never got done. It went to a shop and it was apart. He collected a lot of parts for it, but he never got it completed. So a couple of years ago, he pulled it from that shop thinking he wasn't gonna do it, and it's been sitting next to his house ever since. So my friend called me and said, hey, this thing it's a good old hot rod. Maybe you should see if you know anyone who can buy it or if you want it. So I had a customer looking for a car, and I called my buddy, got a hold of the guy who owned the car, went to Louisiana to buy what we thought was a very, very solid, good old 34 Roadster that we were gonna build into a, kind of nice traditional car. Was blown away, heard the stories of the car. The guy didn't want to sell it, but he kind of had to. The car is immaculately solid. I mean, it looks a little crusty, but there's no rust anywhere. It's a good one. There was a decal on the side. It said Minnesota Road Jockeys. And I just thought it was weird that a California hot rod would have a decal from Minnesota on it. So I took a picture of that, posted it to some friends, found out right away that that was an active club in the Minneapolis area. And then we just narrowed it down to those club members, and we found the car and the guy who owned it. The guy's name was Dave Babler. He was a very prominent Minnesota hot rodder. This is the Dave Babler Roadster. So the story as we know it is Dave went to California in the mid to late 50s, 57-ish, let's say, and bought this car. What he had was a Roadster that was mostly done. I believe it was done, but there was no engine. The interior and top were done by Gaylord. It had a Carson top, had white interior. He brought it back to Minnesota. His father owned an auto body shop. They repainted it, and they put a Chevy Corvette, a 57 Corvette motor in it. In the meantime, when it first got done, it was on the cover of a local Minnesota magazine called Cars and Clubs. It was on the cover and it was featured in there, and it went to a few other regional shows, but his dream was to take it to the Oakland Roadster Show. So he, in 1959, put it on a trailer behind some old truck, was driving to the Oakland Roadster Show, got relatively close, was in California at some mountain pass. The truck got stuck. He decided he had to get going, took the chains off the truck, put them on the Roadster, drove the Roadster down the mountain and all the way to the Oakland Roadster Show. So this was 1959. This is the year the a la carte won, so it's crazy to think that this car was there. At that show, he met Tex Smith, who was a founder of the LA Roadsters. Tex Smith was like, hey man, you need to move to California and become an LA Roadster. So he did. And I don't know exactly the details, but shortly after, he moved to Los Angeles and started hanging out with all the LA Roadster guys. Tex Smith was, of course, a writer, photographer for Hot Rod Magazine and Peterson Publishing. He documented all of this stuff, and they would do these rod runs where they had all these famous cars. I mean, included the Doane Spencer car, the McGee Roadster, the Ricky Nelson Roadster. It's hot rod royalty. And through pictures of all me studying all those cars over the years, I've looked at all these pictures for hours, and some of them are iconic. This car is in every one of those photos. So Dave Babler was there with those guys. He sold the car shortly after. He ended up buying the SoCal belly tanker, repainting it and racing it for several years under his own name. He was a badass. He was a top fuel dragster driver. At some point, the car got sold, I would say in the very early 60s. And then that's where we don't know what happened to it. And then it moved, it ended up in Texas where the guy we got it from got it. It's a 34 Ford Roadster. It has a really kick-ass old Dago dropped axle. It has a homemade hood that's been louvered. The hood sides were homemade. The windshield has been leaned back super crazy. And it had the Gaylord top. All of the holes, door handles, all of that was filled. It had 36 DeSoto or 37, whatever it is, DeSoto bumpers. It had a Continental kit. That was basically it. It was just a super clean, like kind of street roadster of the day. When we got it, it didn't have the fenders on. It was just the body and the frame. So it had this decal, and you can see the blue paint is over the top of the decal, and there's 55 Buick Titan red under it, which is the color it was. But it says, you know, Road Jockeys, Minnesota. And that was the telltale sign of the car. In all of the pictures I found, the decal's right there, you know, so there's no question this is the car. We have most of the parts that were on it when it was the Dave Babler car. The top and the interior are missing, but we have it had these neat little lights, like all the little details that kind of made the car what it was we have. When it was painted blue, the interior was redone in black, and I've looked, there's nothing left. There is in the door panels, there's like the holes where the moldings were that Gaylord used, so they're actually the same door panels, but all the material's gone. There's a little bit of strip of material on the dash that's still original Gaylord. It had a 57 Corvette engine. It had 3 2s. The transmission had an adapter. It was the Corvette 3-speed that had an adapter to the Ford torque tube. So the transmission and the adapter are still in there. So we just need to find a 57 Corvette engine, which won't be hard. I can't wait. I mean, it's by far, of all the Survivor hot rods and old hot rods in general that I've been around, it's in the best shape. And the provenance of this car is just amazing. I mean, it was among some of the greatest hot rods that none of us would be doing it if it wasn't for those cars. And this car was like their bro, you know what I mean? Like it's not like, you know, it's definitely not the Doane Spencer car, but it was in the parking lot with the Doane Spencer car, which is like pretty insane. So, I mean, the more we find out about it, the more places we see it. So it was a prominent car in those few years it was out in California. So I'm hoping that it was a prominent car earlier than that. You know, I want to find out who louvered the hood and who smoothed it out, because it could have been, who knows? I mean, it could have been some dude in his backyard, but it could have been Valley Custom. So, I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Either way, we're going to get it restored, and you know, this isn't a car, I don't believe, that should be put together as is and just run as an old hot rod. It's important enough. I mean, we have so many old photos, we have the old magazine, that I feel like it should be restored back to how it looked at the 1959 Oakland Roadster Show, and then take it to the Grand National Roadster Show when it's done. And we're really just trying to find all the history we can on this car, because it's pretty awesome. this is the Lemon Drop Roadster. It is a 1932 Ford Roadster. It's basically, it's not anything. It's not a Survivor, but it kind of is a Survivor because everything on it is old. Everything but the body. But it's an original 32 frame, original 32 rear. It has a 34 Ford crossmember in the back that was, it's a little flatter than stock. It has a 59AB flathead out of an old, another old hot rod. It's got a super rare Dixie Western 2.2 adapter. It's got the exclusive Bonaire heads. You know, all the good stuff. We only have the good stuff. But it's just a cool old hot rod. So, I mean, you know, it's all old stuff. Everything's old and everything was on a hot rod, just none of it was ever together. So I had all this stuff laying around and I knew I actually had an original 32 body that I was gonna put on it, but I ended up selling that to a customer that's turning into a full build for the shop. So I had all this kind of like beater hot rod stuff and I didn't have a body, so I bought a brand new Brookville body and I funky faux patinaed it, so now it looks all old-timey. So I got the body and it was all brand new bare metal and I needed to make it match the car. So I decided to do a patina job. I've done a lot of blending with old patina because I use old parts all the time, and I've chopped cars and matched the paint, or I've fixed an old car where it needed like a little section to match the rest of the car, but I had never done a whole body, and to be honest, I don't even like that. It's not something that I normally would do. It's not something that I like go up to when I see one. I'm like, oh, look at that. I kind of think patina needs to be earned. So all of that being said, it was really fun doing this process because it's literally like spraying some paint on and throwing dirt at it, and then more paint and shellac and lacquers and paints that don't get along, so they kind of react to each other. You know, it's just to make it realistic. I mean, a lot of guys will like buff through their quarter and then they think it looks old, and it just doesn't. It just looks like you have fake patina. So the idea was to make it look really authentic, and the way we did it is layering all those paints plus giving it texture. I brushed some paints on, I'd wipe it with steel wool and rags. I burned it with a torch in some spots. Like, I just did all this stuff trying to find ways to make it look like it's, you know, a 60 or 70-year-old paint job. And, you know, I mean, I can't even tell anymore if it looks good or not. It looks pretty good to me. I don't know if I saw it, if I think it's totally fake, or if I would buy it, but I think it's pretty authentic looking. We just tried to make it look like it had been that way together. So now we've been kind of dialing the car in. It's running finally. I mean, we still have a lot left to do, but it's coming along. Is that it?